Potatoes, rice, and pasta. If you've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, you've probably all but thrown these things away. And you probably should, unless you stick around for this important tidbit that I'm going to share with you that may allow you to include them in your diet still. Hi, and welcome to Nature's Path to Wellness. My name is Wendy, and I'm a natural nutrition clinical practitioner that helps you get to the root of your health concerns and deal with them naturally. In the early 1980s, the science of resistant starches was discovered, changing the idea that all starches were digested in the small intestine. It's important to understand what starches are, so let's break this down. When you think of starches, your mind probably goes to things like carbohydrate-rich foods, potatoes, rice, and pasta, the ones that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And you're correct, but what you need to know that most plant foods, including fruits and vegetables, store their energy as starch. And when it comes to us, starches play a very important role in a well-balanced diet because they help provide the body with glucose, which is the primary source of energy for every single cell in our body. When I mentioned the word glucose, that might be a little scary for some, especially if you have type 2 diabetes, but don't run away just yet. Carbs and starchy foods have been demonized so much over the last few years that so many people have run to things like the keto diet and the carnivore diet, where they're throwing out every single carb from their diet pretty much and all starchy foods. And so the fact of the matter is that when we're focused on starch and carbohydrates, we really should be looking at the foods that are highly processed, foods that contain lots of added sugars, and foods that contain high fructose corn syrup. Now, those are the type of foods that we need to be ditching, not the healthy plant foods that do contain starch and carbohydrates, because again, they are a very important part of a well-balanced diet. So I'm going to take you all the way back to probably your grade 5 or 6 science class, and you'll probably remember something called photosynthesis. And so when it comes to plants, they go through a process called photosynthesis, where they take light energy and convert it into chemical energy. They create starch polymers to store glucose during the photosynthesis process. And so this in turn makes plants good sources of energy for us. When we consume a starchy food, the body converts that starch into glucose, and then it is converted into ATP, known as adenosine triphosphate, which is a nucleotide which provides energy for every single cell in our body. So glucose isn't necessarily a bad thing. We do need it. We need it for things like muscle contractions, and it's probably important not to miss the note that our hearts are a muscle, so we want that to keep contracting as it should, and we need it for nerve impulses and for DNA synthesis, the very thing that makes us exist. So, as I mentioned before, resistant starches were something that was looked at back in the early 80s. And so we found that starches actually that are resistant go on from the small intestine into the large intestine, where they are actually beneficial at helping to feed our healthy gut bacteria. And a healthy gut bacteria is super important for things such as our overall health and immunity and brain function. So it's pretty important. And so when it comes to starches, there are some foods that are naturally high in resistant starch, foods such as beans, some vegetables, seeds, and nuts. But what is really interesting is that you and I can actually create resistant starch on our own. And so what many people find is that by taking these foods like potatoes, rice, and pasta, cooking them and putting them in the fridge, and then consuming them the next day when they're really cold, so maybe taking a pasta and putting it into your salad, the blood glucose spike that would normally be quite high after having something like pasta or potatoes is significantly lower in many people. Now, this doesn't say that every single person is going to experience the same effect from the resistant starch. You and I might, experience a different result. And so it doesn't mean that, okay, hooray, we can go out and eat all the pasta that we want, or the rice, or the potatoes that we want. But what would be interesting for you to experience is to experiment with a little bit of these foods and see how your blood glucose levels are impacted, especially if these are foods that you enjoy and you would like to continue consuming in your diet. And again, we're not sitting down to a whole big bowl of pasta or whole plate of potatoes. I quite often like to make a salad, and I'll make pasta and I'll have a little bit of pasta with a salad for dinner, and I'll save some. I'll intentionally make a little bit extra and I'll put it in the fridge. And then the next day I'll pull it out and just put in, I don't know, like a half a cup, maybe a cup of pasta, and I'll mix it in with lots of fibrous vegetables, so lots of lettuce, lots of tomatoes and onions and all kinds of things in there. Now you have to remember the benefit of the fiber is to also help in reducing the carb load so on your body, right? So you don't have as much of an insulin spike. So that paired with this resistant starch can actually keep the blood sugar levels for people who are experiencing type 2 diabetes and who would normally have an insulin spike after a meal like that. It can help to keep it down. So I encourage you to give it a try and see how it works for you. And if you want to go a step further in creating more resistant starch meals, you can add some beans. So if you're having a rice with a little bit of pasta, throw in some beans in there, because beans and even some berries, if you'd like to add some strawberries to your salad, they actually act as starch barriers. And raspberries are actually the most effective at this because they inhibit the enzyme that digests starch, leaving even more to carry on to your gut bacteria. So you want to create a diet lifestyle that's going to be sustainable for the long term. People that are going on keto diets and carnivore diets and all the different types of diets, and I'm sure they're having great results in the beginning, and a lot of times they end up falling off of the wagon, so to speak, because these diets become unsustainable. You don't want to be eating these same foods for the rest of your life. I can't imagine being on a carnivore diet and eating meat for the rest of my life, day in and day out, and animal products. So that would be very hard for me to do. There are some people that do very well on it. But if you're looking to have a nice, well-balanced diet with lots of fruits and vegetables and some of the carbs that you enjoy and starchy foods, balance is super key here, and creating little ways and loopholes that you can keep these foods in your diets so that you can still enjoy them. I hope this video has been helpful for you, and if it has, do give it a thumbs up. It helps it to reach more people that are probably looking for this information to help themselves with type 2 diabetes and managing their blood glucose levels. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, I ask you to subscribe and stick around for more health and nutrition information. And I do look forward to seeing you here again next time at Nature's Path to Wellness, where your journey to lifelong health begins. Take care and see you soon.